Management declared most of the witnesses against Janette as anonymous, without any valid moral nor legal reasons, making it impossible for Janette to challenge her accusers. And even where there are valid reasons, management are obliged by case law to conduct discreet background checks to ensure that there are no personal grudges and to ensure the credibility of such accusers. The Federation of Juris Services failed in these responsibilities. In fact, the information which was to surface concerning Mr. Ighodaro and his conduct and attitude in the workplace was instead suppressed during Janette's investigation. In this continuing quest to clear Janette's name, I would now like to present this information to you. This information comes from documents the Federation were reluctant to disclose, claiming that it was irrelevant and even accusing me of inappropriately fishing for information.
Janette was obliged to officially report matters of the joint incompetence towards residents of Mr. Ighodaro and his friend Mr. X. She was then to discover that allegations had been brought against her by Mr. Ighodaro and his friend Mr. X. Management also knew of a second female member of staff who had also been obliged to officially report Mr. Ighodaro's incompetence regarding residents. She was also to have allegations brought against her by Mr. Ighodaro. Management were also aware of a third female member of staff who was to document a catalogue of the most serious issues she was having with Mr. Ighodaro's unacceptable behaviour and attitude on the unit. This person was also to have allegations brought against her by Mr. Ighodaro. The record showed that Mr. Ighodaro brought allegations against all the members of staff who had been unfortunate enough to cross his path.
In the few short months of employment, Mr. Ighodaro had amassed a long list of issues against himself. The following information is from witness statements collected by the investigation team themselves and from documents that were fully at their disposal.
Was slow and incompetent. Was argumentative. Inability to carry out instructions. Failed to carry out instructions. Was told to do one thing and he'd do another. Couldn't communicate with him because he wouldn't listen. Staff found it difficult to work with him. Was disobedient to instructions. Was insubordinate to a senior member of staff. Argued in front of residents. Left residents soaked in urine and feces to go on his break. Nothing registered with him. Didn't seem to grasp anything.
It was known to the managers that Mr. Ighodaro had claimed to at least one member of staff that he suffered from an obsessive-compulsive disorder.
He used to tell me about his disease, OCD. He liked things very neat and tidy.
He also made this claim to Janette and to at least one other member of staff I've since spoken to. But there is no evidence of any investigation into how this alleged disorder might have affected his judgment when criticising the actions of other members of staff.
Mr. Ighodaro had described in his original letter the most horrendous first week of hell working with Janette, which resulted in him bringing numerous unwitnessed allegations against Janette and, of course, against the other members of staff who had previously had cause to report his behaviour and attitude. And yet, under interview, he was to state that when his friends had asked him about his first week working with Janette, he said it went okay. This extraordinary and vital contradiction was discovered in the documents that they did not wish me to have sight of.
Every statement that Janette made in her defence regarding Mr. Ighodaro's attitude and behaviour in the workplace was already confirmed by the documentation in the possession of the managers, but it was never to be referred to again. In fact, they were to portray Mr. Ighodaro as a credible witness throughout Janette's investigation. And this maintaining of his credibility was not to end there.
At the tribunal, the Federation of Juris Services knowingly quoted Mr. Ighodaro's untrue statement that there were no further issues between him and another member of staff he had brought allegations against. Mr. Ighodaro said himself that he experienced no other problems in the past with Sister X and that what happened on that day was a one-off. They made this sworn statement in the full knowledge that they possessed documentation listing a catalogue of further issues between them, including an allegation of the abuse of a female resident. Mr. Ighodaro had taken an elderly female resident into the toilets on his own for 15 minutes after being expressly told not to do so.
The documents further allege that this poor woman was so distressed by Mr. Ighodaro's actions that it took them half an hour to calm her down in order to prevent her from bringing a complaint against Heathlands Care Home. The important point here is that the investigation team knew from the documents in their possession that Mr. Ighodaro had not been telling the truth, but they were still to maintain his credibility.
Joanne Ingber, Janette's investigation manager, stated at the strategy meeting with the adult safeguarding team that there had never been any complaints about Martin Ighodaro. At the follow-up strategy meeting, when the Federation were undoubtedly fully aware of all the complaints and serious allegations against Mr. Ighodaro, this untrue statement, according to the minutes, had not been corrected by Joanne Ingber, nor by Karen Johnson, the disciplinary officer, who, according to the minutes, was also present at this second meeting.
During my own investigations, I inquired whether these allegations had been reported to the proper authorities as required, and whether this untrue information had since been corrected in these official records. My recorded delivery letter was treated with total contempt by the Federation of Jewish Services.